On a spring afternoon in Boston, Amy Johnson was gazing out the window of her small apartment in the West End. She looked forward to seeing the jacaranda bloom in the park visible from her window every year. Today was a special day. It had been a week since her boyfriend Jason had proposed to her, and they had finally arranged to meet his parents. Amy headed to the kitchen and glanced at the photo frame on the table. It showed her and her mother Martha smiling together. Martha had worked as a hotel cleaner for decades to raise her daughter alone. Amy felt a warmth in her chest when she thought about her mother. Even after Amy dropped out of high school, Martha never once blamed her and always supported her decisions. "You didn't say anything when I told you I wanted to be a pastry chef, did you, Mom?" Amy murmured to the photograph. After dropping out of high school, she had started working at a local cake shop. She studied recipes on her own at night and spent her days off reading technical books on pastry making at the library. Those efforts had paid off, and she had been hired as an assistant pastry chef at Lucille, an upscale restaurant in Boston. And that's where she met Jason. He was a regular customer at the restaurant. He was an elite, serving as senior vice president at the IT company run by his father, Richard Williamson. Behind his proper appearance and composed demeanor was a surprisingly kind and playful man. At first, when he came to the kitchen to share his thoughts on the dessert, Amy thought it was just a whim. However, Jason began visiting every Friday without fail, and eventually started ordering only Amy's desserts. Then, 3 months later, he gathered his courage and asked Amy out on a date. "Hey, I made a special dessert tonight. Would you like to try it?" Outside the restaurant. Those words marked the beginning of their relationship. However, Jason's family remained mysterious to Amy. He rarely spoke much about his parents. She only knew that his father Richard was the CEO of Williamson Technology, and his mother Victoria was a socialite. "My parents are busy," was Jason's standard response. Throughout their year of dating, he had always used that excuse to delay meeting his parents. Amy pretended not to mind, but deep down she was anxious. Then last week, during dinner at an upscale restaurant, Jason suddenly got down on one knee and opened a small blue velvet box. Inside gleamed a diamond ring larger than any Amy had ever seen. "Amy Johnson, will you marry me?" Overcome with emotion and tears, Amy answered, "Yes." That night, Jason revealed his true feelings for the first time. "Actually, my mother might not like you. She's, well, the type who values family background and education." Amy understood immediately. Someone like her, a high school dropout raised by a single mother, would probably not be considered suitable as a wife for a Williamson son. "But don't worry," Jason squeezed her hand. "I love you, and eventually my parents will accept you too. Especially after they taste your wonderful desserts." Amy smiled, but her anxiety didn't disappear. And today, the day of meeting had finally come. Amy picked up the navy blue dress that she had taken out and put back in the closet countless times. This was her most formal outfit. She put on the dress, stood in front of the mirror, and took a deep breath. The doorbell rang, and Amy hurried to the door. When she opened it, her mother Martha was standing there. "Nervous?" Martha asked as soon as she saw her daughter's face. "Yes, but I'll be fine, probably." Martha gently embraced Amy's shoulders. Her hair was now noticeably turning gray, but her eyes shone with youthful brightness only when looking at her daughter. "You're a wonderful woman, Amy. No matter how fancy their family is, they'll like you once they get to know you." Amy was encouraged by her mother's words. Martha and Amy had led a modest but love-filled life. They might not have been materially blessed, but the bond between the two was stronger than anyone's. "Mom, thank you for coming with me." Martha smiled. "Of course. I was looking forward to meeting Jason's parents too." However, Amy thought she saw something like worry in Martha's eyes. She decided to believe it was her imagination. She received a bouquet of flowers from Jason and put on her cardigan. Tonight might change her life. She vaguely felt that. "Let's go, Mom. They're waiting for us." The two quietly left the apartment and got into the waiting taxi. Their destination was La Maison d'Or, an upscale restaurant in Boston where the meeting with the Williamson family would take place. The interior of La Maison d'Or was even more luxurious than Amy had imagined. Chandeliers gleamed from the ceiling, marble floors stretched below, and silver cutlery was arranged on tables draped with white tablecloths. Jason was already waiting for them, and he stood up to greet Amy as soon as he saw her. "Hey, thank you for coming," he kissed Amy and politely greeted Martha. "My parents will arrive soon. They called to say they'd be a little late." Amy smiled, though she could feel her hands trembling with nervousness. About 10 minutes after the three of them were seated, there was movement at the restaurant entrance. Seeing Jason quickly stand up, Amy turned around. There stood Victoria, dressed in an elegant tweed suit with a pearl necklace gleaming at her throat. Next to her was her husband, Richard Williamson, a middle-aged man with a stern expression but kind eyes resembling Jason's. Jason guided his parents to the table and introduced them. "Dad, Mom, this is Amy Johnson and her mother, Martha Johnson." Victoria looked Amy up and down, then put on a perfunctory smile. Amy straightened her back and tried to behave as naturally as possible. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Williamson, Mr. Williamson." Richard politely shook hands, but Victoria merely nodded without extending her hand. "So you're the one dating our son," Victoria's voice had a subtle coldness to it. "Please, sit down." At first, the conversation was superficial, talk about the weather and the restaurant's reputation. But by the time the appetizers arrived, Victoria suddenly changed the subject. "Amy, which university did you graduate from?" After a moment of silence, Amy answered honestly. "Actually, I didn't go to college. I started working without finishing high school." She felt the atmosphere at the table change. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Oh, I see. And your family?" "I live with my mother. My mother is." "I work as a hotel cleaning staff," Martha answered calmly. Victoria just said, "I see," and clearly lost interest. However, a few minutes later, she began questioning again. "What about your father?" Amy took a deep breath. "I've never met my father. He was already gone when my mother had me." "So you were raised by a single mother?" Victoria's tone suddenly turned cold. Jason tried to intervene but was cut off by his mother. "Jason, be quiet. This is important." Richard silently observed the situation. "Amy, do you know how much my son earns?" Victoria abruptly asked. "Mom." Jason protested, but it was already too late. "I'm not interested in Jason's money," Amy answered as calmly as possible. "I was attracted to his character." "Yes, of course you were," Victoria said sarcastically. "But I wonder, how did a pastry chef's assistant working at an upscale restaurant end up meeting our son?" Martha quietly spoke up. "My daughter is a very talented pastry chef. Your son recognized her talent. You just do a job like a maid, don't you?" Victoria sneered. "Do you understand how out of place that is for a Williamson bride?" A heavy silence fell over the table. Amy felt her cheeks burning. Jason was clearly upset and looked to his father for help, but Richard remained silent. Then, Victoria raised her wine glass and smirked. There was a cruel gleam in her eyes. "This family has been prestigious for generations. A high school dropout raised in a single-parent home. A gold digger like you doesn't belong in this family." The next moment, she tilted her glass and poured red wine over Amy's head. The entire restaurant fell silent. Amy was frozen in shock, feeling the wine dripping down her face. Her navy blue dress was stained red, and wine was dripping from her hair. Jason stood up and shouted, "Mom! How could you do that?" Richard also raised his voice, "Victoria, that's enough." But what no one expected was Martha Johnson's reaction. She slowly stood up, took a napkin, and gently wiped Amy's face. Then, with calm steps, she stood in front of Victoria. Her back was straight, and her eyes were filled with determination. Martha stared at Victoria and said in a quiet voice, "Mrs. Williamson, you clearly don't understand who you're talking to." The moment she heard those words, Victoria's expression froze. As if sensing something, the color drained from her face. Amy was confused. She couldn't understand the meaning behind her mother's words and didn't know what was happening. But seeing Victoria's terrified expression, she realized there was some history there that she didn't know about. "Let's go, Amy," Martha took her daughter's hand. "We're done for today." Amy and Martha left the restaurant. Behind them, they could see Jason trying to follow them, but being stopped by his parents. In the taxi, Amy wiped her tears with trembling hands. "Mom, what did that mean? Why did she make that face?" Martha let out a deep sigh. "I'll tell you when we get home. There are things I need to explain to you." At those words, Amy saw a resolve in her mother's eyes that she had never seen before. The taxi carrying the two of them continued to drive quietly through the dark city. Back at the apartment, Amy brewed coffee with shaking hands. Though she had changed out of her dress, the smell of wine still lingered in her hair. Her heart was full of confusion and humiliation. Martha silently watched her daughter. "Mom, what you said at the restaurant, what did that mean?" Amy finally spoke. Victoria's face changed. Martha heaved a deep sigh. She realized it was time to tell the truth she had kept secret for years. "Sit down, Amy. There's something I need to tell you." There was a dignity in Martha's voice that Amy had never heard before. She sat on the sofa and waited for Martha to begin. "I never told you who I really am," Martha said quietly. "My real name is Martha Bradford. I'm the youngest daughter of the Bradford family of Boston." Amy gasped in surprise. Bradford, she knew that name. It was one of the oldest and wealthiest families in New England. "You're joking, right?" Martha smiled. "No, I'm not joking." She stood up and took an old trunk from the back of the closet. She unlocked it and pulled out a leather album. As Martha turned the pages, photographs of a world unknown to Amy appeared. A huge mansion, elegant parties, and a young Martha, her mother in a luxurious life Amy had never imagined. "This is my family home, Bradford Manor." Martha pointed to a photo of a majestic mansion along the Cape Cod shoreline. "It was built in the 18th century. I grew up there." Amy flipped through the album pages one by one in disbelief. There were photos of her young mother making her society debut, at her college graduation, and surrounded by prominent politicians and businessmen. But, why? Amy was confused. Why did you give up such a life? Martha's eyes held a mixture of nostalgia and determination. "I chose freedom. That world had stifling rules. Who I should marry, how I should behave, everything was decided for me." Martha pulled out an old newspaper clipping. It showed a headline, "Bradford family daughter mysteriously disappears," alongside a photo of a young Martha. "When I was 23, I left home, abandoning everything. And then I met your father." "My father? He was just a laborer. A kind man, but our marriage didn't last. He left before you were born." Martha's voice conveyed resignation rather than regret. "I could have gone back to my family, but I decided to follow my own path. And I started over with a new last name, Johnson." Amy held her head. "For 32 years, you never told me. I wanted to free you from the burden of being a Bradford." I wanted you to be free from the pressure and expectations of that world. Martha took her daughter's hand. I'm truly sorry. Amy stood up and paced around the room. It felt as if she had suddenly realized her life had been built on a lie. So, I am. Yes, you are a direct descendant of the Bradford family. You have the blood of a prestigious family that has continued for 13 generations, Martha said quietly. A history that can't be compared to upstart families like Victoria Williamson's. Amy frowned at those words. Mom, even you're talking down to them like that. Martha lowered her eyes, ashamed of her words. I'm sorry. My old habits came out. Actually, there's a history between the Williamson and Bradford families. Richard's father started his business with a loan from my father. Socially, they were always beneath us. Amy sighed. So that's why Victoria was so shaken by your words. Martha nodded. Victoria knows who I am. We met several times when we were young. She might have remembered me, but she couldn't be sure. But now she knows from what I said tonight. Amy returned to the sofa and covered her face with her hands. I don't know how this will affect my relationship with Jason. That's up to you, Martha said gently. It's your decision how to handle this fact. Amy's phone rang. It was a call from Jason. Do you want to answer it? Martha asked. Amy shook her head. I can't talk right now. There's too much to think about. Martha placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. I'm prepared to use the Bradford name again for your happiness. I might be able to restore relationships with the family. My brothers are still looking for me. Amy was surprised. I can't believe I have family I've never met. Do you know Bradford Industries? Martha asked. Amy nodded. It was one of the largest conglomerates in the Northeast. That's our family company. It's currently run by my brother, Joseph Bradford IV. Amy looked at her phone again. A message from Jason had arrived. Sorry about my mother's behavior. Want to talk? Can we meet? She started to write a reply but didn't know what to say yet. 2 days ago, she was just a pastry chef. And now, she learned she was an heir to the Bradford family. Mom, what should I do now? Martha smiled gently. First, you should talk to Jason. You don't have to tell him anything if you don't want to. But if he truly loves you, he won't care about your family background. What about Victoria? She needed a lesson. But if she continues to hurt you? Martha's eyes showed determination. I won't hesitate to use my power as a Bradford. Amy felt complex emotions seeing this new side of her mother. Her mother had always been humble and warm. But now, she understood that attitude was a choice. Martha had abandoned the power and privilege of the Bradfords to live a life she chose for herself. Good night, Amy, Martha kissed her daughter's cheek. We'll talk more tomorrow. Amy lay in bed but couldn't sleep. Her head was full of thoughts about the Bradford family. And she was also anxious about what would happen to her relationship with Jason. Eventually, she made up her mind. She sent Jason a message. Let's meet tomorrow. We need to talk. The reply came immediately. Thank you. I love you. Amy closed her eyes. She was beginning to face her identity and consider how to deal with this situation. The next day, Amy was waiting for Jason at a cafe near Boston Common. Though her heart was still in turmoil from yesterday's events, she had decided to at least hear what he had to say. The door opened, and Jason entered. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. When he spotted Amy, he walked straight to her table. Thank you for coming, Jason said quietly. Amy silently nodded. I'm truly sorry about yesterday, he continued. My mother's behavior was inexcusable. Both my father and I severely criticized her. You don't need to apologize, Amy said. It's not your fault. But I couldn't protect you. That's what hurts the most. Jason's voice was heavy with regret. Actually, my mother wants to hold a reconciliation dinner. Amy raised her eyebrows in surprise. Reconciliation? After what she did yesterday? You might not believe it, but she's ashamed of what she did. She might be concerned about what would happen if it got into the news, but anyway, she says she wants to apologize. Amy sighed. She didn't think Victoria's apology would be sincere. It was probably just to keep up appearances. My mother seemed shocked by your mother too, Jason continued. After leaving the restaurant, she seemed strangely unsettled. Amy smiled with mixed feelings. Yes, Mom might have that effect. She hesitated whether to tell Jason what she had learned last night. But she felt it wasn't the right time yet. She needed to consult with her mother first. When is that dinner? Tomorrow night. At our house, Jason said, looking a bit nervous. She wants your mother to come too. Amy pondered. I'll talk to my mom about it. Jason took her hand. Amy, no matter what happens, my feelings won't change. I love you. Please believe that. When Amy returned home, she explained the situation to Martha. I see, a reconciliation dinner, Martha said, sitting on the sofa. I think we should go. Really? Amy was surprised. You want to see her again? Martha smiled quietly. This might be our chance to reveal our true identity. If Victoria is truly remorseful, it's a good opportunity to find out. I haven't told Jason anything, Amy confessed. Should I tell him the truth? That's your choice, Martha said. But I think you should make sure he truly loves you before revealing the truth. The next evening, Amy and Martha arrived at the Williamson mansion. Located in the upscale neighborhood of Chestnut Hill, the house was indeed impressive, but it was new and lacked the history of Bradford Manor where Martha had grown up. When they rang the bell, a maid greeted them and led them to the living room. Richard, Victoria, and Jason were already waiting. Victoria had a calm expression, quite different from yesterday, but she clearly tensed up when Martha entered. Welcome, Richard stood up to greet the two. As the head of the household, I sincerely apologize for the grave discourtesy you experienced. Victoria nodded slightly. Yesterday. I was too emotional. My behavior was inexcusable. I sincerely apologize. Her words didn't seem sincere, but Amy silently accepted them. Dinner is ready, Richard said. Please, come to the dining room. During the meal, the conversation remained superficial. Talk about the weather, Boston events, and occasionally Jason's work. Amy noticed that Victoria avoided speaking directly to her. When dessert was served, Victoria finally spoke. Amy, where did your mother grow up? Martha smiled calmly. Cape Cod. I grew up near the sea. I see, Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. I thought you looked familiar. Must be mistaken identity, Martha answered succinctly. However, as the meal progressed, Victoria's attitude began to change again. She drank several glasses of wine, and gradually her words became sharper. Amy, in the end, you don't fit our family's status, she suddenly declared. No matter what Jason says, the social difference is a fact. Mom. Jason raised his voice. Amy quietly stood up from her chair. Mrs. Williamson, it seems you haven't learned anything. Martha also stood up. There was a light of determination in her eyes. Victoria, I've kept quiet all this time, but I've had enough. The air in the room filled with tension. I am Martha Bradford. My father was Joseph Bradford III. A silence like ice fell over the room. The color drained from Richard's face. Bradford? Richard asked with a trembling voice. Bradford of Bradford Industries. Martha nodded. I left home 30 years ago and started a new life. But I cannot overlook my daughter being treated this way. Victoria turned completely pale. No way, that Bradford family. And Amy is a direct descendant of the Bradford family, Martha said quietly. Jason was stunned. Amy, is that true? Amy nodded hesitantly. I just found out yesterday. Mom had kept it a secret. Martha took out her smartphone and dialed a number. She put it on speaker and placed it on the table. Joseph Bradford speaking, a deep male voice resonated. Joe, it's me. Martha. A surprised voice came from the other end of the phone. Martha. It's been 30 years. Where are you? In Boston. I've finally come back, Martha smiled. There's someone I want the family to meet. My daughter. Your daughter. Joseph's voice mixed with joy. Wonderful. Bradford Manor is always open. The whole family is waiting. Martha ended the call. Richard was too shocked to speak. Victoria's face was red with fear and humiliation. Richard, Martha said quietly. Your father received his first loan from my father, didn't he? When starting Williamson Technology. Richard silently nodded. If you can't control your wife, that suggests there might be issues with your management abilities as well. Richard looked sternly at Victoria. Don't bring any more shame to our family. Jason rushed to Amy. I didn't know. But that doesn't change anything. Whoever you are, my feelings won't change. Amy looked into his eyes. Really? Even if I had nothing, would you still love me? Of course, Jason answered without hesitation. I love you because you're you. That's all. Amy sighed with relief. She was still confused by this complicated situation, but she was truly grateful for Jason's words. Martha placed her hand on Amy's shoulder. Let's go. That's enough for today. Before they left, Victoria said with a trembling voice, Wait. I'm truly sorry. This time, her words contained genuine remorse. Amy noticed the change. She looked at Victoria and quietly said, What matters is the value of a person, not their family background, Mrs. Williamson. That's what my mother taught me. Amy and Martha left the Williamson house. As they got into their car, Jason came running after them. Can I call you tomorrow? He asked. Amy smiled. Yes, of course. As the car drove away, Amy was thinking about how to accept this new reality while facing her identity. She was a Bradford, and at the same time a Johnson. And above all, she was determined to remember to be herself. A year later, in early summer, white tents were set up in the vast gardens of Bradford Manor in the Boston suburbs, and flowers were in full bloom. It was Amy and Jason's wedding day. Amy was in a room of the mansion, receiving the final adjustments to her wedding dress. The dress was modern, designed by herself, but incorporated some of the lace that had been passed down through generations of the Bradford family. Nervous? Martha entered the room and placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. She was wearing a sophisticated dress with the family's sapphire necklace gleaming at her throat. However, her expression still held the same gentleness and humility. A little, Amy smiled. But I'm happy. The past year had been tumultuous. Martha had mended her relationship with the Bradford family and reunited with her brothers and relatives after 30 years. Amy had suddenly become a member of a large family and was beginning to build new relationships with her uncles and cousins. Surprisingly, although Martha had claimed her right to receive part of the family inheritance, she had donated most of it to charity. She still preferred a modest lifestyle and maintained her belief that wealth comes with responsibility. Mrs. Williamson has arrived, Martha said, looking out the window. Amy nodded. Her relationship with Victoria remained complicated, but they had at least reconciled on the surface. Since that night, Victoria had lost much of her standing in society, and her relationship with Richard had cooled. The experience seemed to have taught her humility. "I'm ready," Amy took a deep breath. In the garden, 200 guests had gathered, and Jason was waiting at the altar. As Amy and Martha began to walk, music played, and the attendees stood up. In the front row, members of the Bradford family were lined up. There was Martha's brother Joseph and his family, along with other relatives. On the opposite side sat Richard and Victoria. Victoria was wearing a modest dress and had a humble expression. As Amy stood next to Jason, he whispered, "This is the best day of my life." At the reception after the wedding, Amy approached Victoria's table where she was alone. "Thank you for coming," Amy said quietly. Victoria nodded, looking a bit nervous. "It was a beautiful ceremony. You are a beautiful bride. Let's put the past behind us," Amy extended her hand. "I hope we can start again as a new family." Victoria took her hand with a grateful expression. Tears glistened in her eyes. At dusk that day, Amy and Jason stood on the terrace, receiving congratulations. Martha approached the two. "Look," Martha pointed to the garden. There, people from various backgrounds were gathering, mingling, and laughing together. "This is the world you will build. A world where people respect each other as individuals, regardless of family background or origin." Amy squeezed Jason's hand. She now carried the Bradford name, but still cherished the values she had learned from Martha. The following week, her own patisserie was scheduled to open. She was taking her first step as a business owner. "True nobility isn't about bloodlines, but about the nobility of the heart," Amy said, looking up at the sunset-tinged sky. Martha smiled quietly. She was proud that her life choices had ultimately brought the right lesson to her daughter.